My name is Helen Walker. I'm 68 years old, and I live alone in a little blue house on the east side of Ashland, Oregon. I retired from teaching elementary school 10 years ago, and most days I still wake up early, sip coffee on the back porch, and wait for the sun to climb over the hills. I lost my husband Patrick to a heart attack when our daughter Megan was just 8. For years, it was just the two of us. I juggled work and parenting, packed lunches, attended PTA meetings, and stayed up late helping her memorize spelling words. I gave her everything I had, not just because I loved her, but because I wanted to give her the kind of life I knew she deserved. When Megan got into college, I emptied our savings to pay her tuition. I didn't hesitate. Later, when she and her husband Dylan found a fixer-upper outside town, I offered to help with the down payment. She thanked me, of course, but the gratitude felt thinner than it used to. Like it was expected, not felt. I brushed it off then. We were family. That's what family does. Now they live just 20 minutes from me. Close enough that I could stop by anytime, though I rarely do anymore. I used to bring over lasagna or her favorite peach cobbler, but lately the visits feel rushed. She's always got errands or appointments or some reason to cut the time short. Dylan barely looks up from his phone. Sometimes I wonder if I missed something along the way. A turn I didn't take. A line I crossed without knowing. I call her most days just to check in to hear her voice, but our conversations have started to feel like obligations. Quick. Dry. Filler words wrapped in politeness. It's not that she's unkind. Megan has a good heart. I raised her to be that way. But something between us has shifted, quiet and slow, like winter fog rolling in. I used to feel needed. Now I feel like extra weight on the back seat. Present, but not necessary. Loved, maybe, but not wanted. I don't say any of this out loud. I just notice how my house gets quieter when I come back from hers. I notice how she doesn't ask if I want to stay for coffee. I notice the way I smile anyway, then sit down at my kitchen table and wonder when I became so easy to leave behind. I used to cook Sunday dinners like they still mattered. Roast chicken with lemon and thyme green beans with almonds, mashed potatoes from scratch. I'd text Megan midweek and ask if she and Dylan could make it, and she'd usually reply with something vague like "we'll try" or "depends on Dylan's work." Most weeks they'd cancel last minute or not answer at all. When they did come, they'd eat quickly. Dylan would keep his phone on the table, scrolling between bites. Megan would compliment the food, but her eyes never stayed on mine for long. They always seemed to have somewhere else to be. I started noticing how I'd spend all afternoon setting the table just right, lighting candles, folding cloth napkins, only to feel like a stop on their way to something more important. One evening, I brought out something special, a necklace that belonged to my mother. Gold, simple, worn at the edges. Megan used to admire it when she was little, playing dress-up in front of my mirror. I gave it to her after dinner, carefully laid in a velvet box. She opened it, looked for a second, then said, "Wow, vintage." She smiled politely and placed it in her purse. I didn't hear about it again. I told myself maybe she was tired. Maybe she had other things on her mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the meaning behind things no longer translated. The meals, the gifts, the gestures, they felt one-sided, like I was reaching across a table that was slowly getting longer. I'd clean up after they left and stare at the empty chairs, wondering why the warmth I remembered didn't seem to come back with them. It wasn't dramatic. There was no fight, no big moment. Just little silences that started to feel heavier than words. It was raining harder than usual that night. I had just left the grocery store, a few bags in the back seat. Nothing special, just soup cans, crackers, the usual things I get when the weather turns. The sky was a heavy gray, and the wipers struggled to keep up. The road shimmered under the streetlights like it couldn't decide if it was water or glass. I called Megan mostly out of habit. I just wanted to say hi, maybe ask if they needed anything from the store. She answered, distracted, like I'd caught her mid-scroll or mid-thought. We talked for less than a minute, something about how busy she was and how they'd already eaten. Then she said, "Okay, talk later," and I waited for the line to disconnect. But it didn't. There was a rustling sound, then her voice distant but sharp. She thought I was gone. I heard her say, clear as day, God, I hope she crashes or something. I'm so tired of her. I gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling through the floor. I didn't yell or call her back. I didn't say a word. I just pulled over onto the shoulder, let the blinkers tick, 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 while the rain slammed the windshield. My breath caught in my throat and wouldn't come back. It was like the world had tilted and I was sliding into a place where nothing made sense. For a moment, I stared at the blur of red taillights up ahead and wondered if I should keep driving. But I couldn't. I sat there watching water crawl down the glass in long, slow streaks and felt something inside me crack. Not loud. Just a clean, quiet break. The car was warm, but I felt cold anyway. Like the kind of cold that starts in your chest and spreads without asking. I didn't cry right then. I just sat very still, like maybe if I didn't move, I wouldn't feel it so much. But I did. I felt every inch of it. Every word. Every inch of being unwanted. And I knew nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The following Monday, I made a list. Not of chores or groceries, but of every account policy and payment that had my name attached to Megan's life. There were more than I realized. A credit card I had co-signed when she was fresh out of college. The insurance plan on Dylan's truck. A backup contact on a loan I didn't remember agreeing to. I called the bank first. I asked to be removed from the card. No explanation. Just a quiet request that I no longer be tied to that debt. The woman on the line asked if I was sure, and I said yes without hesitation. It felt like unclipping something heavy from my back. Next was the insurance. I logged in, unchecked their names, and adjusted the coverage to just me. Then I opened my budgeting app and deleted the line that read Megan $250 monthly. I didn't send a message. I didn't make a call. I just stopped. Quiet and clean. Each click, each form signed, each confirmation email felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. I wasn't angry. I didn't carry rage in my chest. I just felt done. Done offering without being seen. Done building bridges only I ever crossed. I didn't imagine how she'd react. I didn't rehearse what I'd say if she called. I was doing this for me. To untangle. To step back into my own life and stand in it with both feet. For years, my identity had been wrapped around being useful, being needed. I thought it kept me connected, but it only made me smaller. By the end of the week, I was no longer financially tied to my daughter's household in any way. It didn't change how I loved her, but it did change how I loved myself, and that I decided was overdue. They didn't notice at first. A week passed, then two. I went about my days the same as always, pruning the rose bushes, returning library books, making tea in the late afternoon. The silence from Megan's side didn't feel different from before, only now it no longer stung. It just sat there, quiet and deserved. Then came the call. Her voice was clipped and frantic. Her card had been declined at the pharmacy, and she couldn't figure out why. I listened, let her speak, let the panic roll through the line, and when she asked if I knew anything, I said calmly, "You'll have to figure that out." She didn't like that. Another call came the next day. Dylan's car insurance had lapsed. His name wasn't on the new policy. There was yelling in the background. More questions. More heat. I stayed steady. I didn't raise my voice. I just repeated what I had already said. "You'll have to figure that out." I could hear it in her pause, in the way the silence filled the space where my explanations used to go. She knew something had shifted. Not just the money, not just the accounts, but me. I had stepped off the platform they were so used to standing on. They didn't ask why. Not really. They were too busy reacting to the inconvenience. And I let them. I let them scramble. I let them feel the absence of what they never thanked. I didn't enjoy it. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity, boundaries. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for the first time, I didn't step back when it was crossed. That night, I sat on my porch and listened to the wind move through the trees. The phone stayed quiet. And for once, so did I. I made the appointment on a Tuesday morning. The office was quiet sun coming through the windows, the kind of day that felt clean and calm. My lawyer, a kind man named Joseph, offered me coffee and asked what brought me in. I told him I was ready to update my will. I didn't hesitate. I asked him to remove Megan and Dylan from all inheritances. No shares of the house, no accounts, no valuables. Instead, I named two beneficiaries. One was a women's shelter on the other side of town that runs transitional housing and provides legal aid. The other was Ruby. Ruby has lived next door to me for 15 years. She's the kind of neighbor who knocks softly when she hears my cough through the wall, who brings soup in a thermos and stays just long enough to check my forehead and wash her hands. She never asks for anything. She just shows up. As Joseph typed, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not from anger, not from bitterness. From knowing I was finally choosing people who had chosen me back. People who didn't keep score. Who didn't vanish when I had nothing left to offer. I asked Joseph if I needed to explain my decisions in the document. He said no, and I smiled. I didn't need to explain them to anyone. They made sense to me. They were mine. When it was done, I signed my name with a steady hand. No tremble. No regret. I thanked him, walked out to my car, and sat there for a minute before driving off. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Like I had just closed a book that had been sitting open too long. And it was the right time to let the story end. Some people might say what I did was harsh, that cutting off support, changing my will, and walking away from the ties I held for so long was cold. But they don't know what it's like to sit in silence after hearing your own child speak about you like a chore. I didn't make those choices out of spite. I made them because I finally understood something I should have known all along. That I matter too. That my worth isn't tied to how much I give or how quietly I absorb the hurt. That love doesn't mean staying small to keep someone else comfortable. It wasn't about punishment. I wasn't trying to make Megan suffer or feel what I felt. I simply stopped offering parts of myself to people who no longer treated them with care. And in doing that, I found something I hadn't had in a long time: peace. Real peace isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's the kind that settles in slowly like sunlight on your face after a long winter. It comes when you let go of the weight that was never yours to carry. I don't regret what I did. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Because choosing myself for once didn't make me selfish. It made me free. Last Saturday, Ellie showed up on my porch. She's 12 now, tall, like her father with her mother's eyes. She didn't say much at first, just stood there, shifting her backpack from one shoulder to the other, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. She held on longer than usual. When she finally let go, she looked up and said she missed me. Not in the casual way kids say it, but like she meant it deep down. I didn't ask who drove her or why today of all days. I just invited her in and made hot chocolate the way she likes it, with too many marshmallows. We sat on the couch under a blanket and watched an old movie. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel so quiet. I listened to her talk about school, her friend's a science project she's excited about. She laughed easily without hesitation. It reminded me of when Megan was that age, before life stretched us out and apart. As the afternoon sun filled the living room, I realized something. Love doesn't always leave. Sometimes it just slips through different cracks, finds new ways to show up. Sometimes it skips a generation not out of malice, but maybe just out of timing. Maybe one day Megan will come back too. Maybe she'll knock on the door, unsure of what she'll find, and I'll open it. I won't pretend the past didn't happen, but I won't shut her out either. When she's ready, she'll know the door was never locked. Until then, I'm not waiting. I'm living. I'm planting new flowers, making soup, letting laughter echo off the walls again. I'm choosing to fill my days with peace instead of longing. I'm not invisible anymore. Not to myself. And that's what matters now.